Despite building a multi-million-dollar empire from scratch, my final moments were spent completely alone, coughing up blood in a pristine white hospital room. The adopted daughter I had sacrificed my youth to raise couldn't be bothered to visit. She was too busy partying with the biological mother who had abandoned her in a motel 2 decades prior. Together they had drained my bank accounts, destroyed my reputation, and simply waited for me to perish. But then I opened my eyes. It was 4 years earlier, and this time I'm holding the front door wide open for them. The first thing I noticed was the lack of pain. For the last 6 months of my previous life, my chest felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. Stress, cardiomyopathy, a broken heart the doctors called it, though they dressed it up in clinical terms. I'd spent 2 years locked in a vicious public legal battle, hemorrhaging cash to lawyers' PR firms and private investigators, fighting to keep my daughter away from a woman who viewed her as a winning lottery ticket. I fought until my body simply gave out. Now I was staring at a vaulted ceiling. The air conditioning hummed a low, steady thrum. My hands, which had been pale and trembling the last time I saw them, were steady. No IV lines, no bruising. I sat up, the silk sheets pooled around my waist. I grabbed the phone off the nightstand. August 14th. My breath caught in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, expecting the sterile smell of bleach and the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor to return. I waited for the crushing weight in my chest. Nothing came, only the scent of my own expensive lavender detergent and the morning sunlight slicing through the heavy linen drapes. August 14th. Chloe was 16. It was the exact day Rachel came back. In my first life, this was the day the nightmare started. I was 38, the CEO of a mid-sized logistics firm I'd built from a single leased truck. I had money, respect, and a daughter I adored. Chloe wasn't mine by blood. Rachel, a girl I'd known in high school, had shown up on my doorstep 16 years ago, handed me a car seat, asked to borrow $300, and never came back. I navigated the foster system, the adoption courts, and the sleepless nights of infancy all by myself. I gave Chloe the world. Private schools, horseback riding lessons, a trust fund. And she resented me for all of it. I was the strict one, the one who made her do homework, the one who grounded her when she snuck out, the one who said no. A sharp, demanding knock on my bedroom door pulled me from the memory. "Mom, you up?" Chloe didn't wait for an answer. She pushed the door open, already dressed in a cropped sweater and jeans that cost more than my first car. She was holding her phone, her thumb scrolling rapidly. She didn't look at me. "The Wi-Fi is being stupid again, and I need you to transfer $1,000 to my debit card. Jenna is having a pool party, and I need a new swimsuit. The ones from last month are hideous." I stared at her, really stared. In the hospital, I had begged to see her. I left voicemails, my voice hoarse and broken, apologizing for things I hadn't even done, just wanting her to hold my hand. She had blocked my number. The last time I saw her in that life, she was standing in a courtroom, holding Rachel's hand, telling a judge that I was emotionally abusive, that I kept her isolated, that I was a cold corporate monster who bought her love because I couldn't feel it. "Did you hear me?" Chloe snapped, finally looking up, her brow furrowed. "What's wrong with you? You look weird." The old me would have sighed, reminded her about budgeting, and then caved and transferred $500. The old me loved her so fiercely, it blinded me to the rot setting in her character. She was entitled, lazy, and profoundly ungrateful. I had created a monster, out of guilt, terrified, that if I didn't give her everything, she would feel the sting of her biological mother's abandonment. "I hear you," I said. My voice sounded different, calmer, lower. The frantic, anxious mother who lived to please this teenager was dead. She died in a hospital bed. "No money today, Chloe. Make do with what you have." Her mouth dropped open. "Are you serious, Mom? I need it." "You don't need anything." I threw the covers back and stood up. I felt strong. "And don't bother asking again. Go downstairs. I'm getting dressed." She scoffed a harsh, dramatic sound and turned on her heel. "You're ruining my life. You never let me do anything," she yelled over her shoulder. I closed the door behind her and walked to the mirror. I looked young, exhausted, but healthy. I rested a hand against the glass, tracing the reflection of my own face. I am not doing this again, I thought. The clarity was absolute. It was a cold, hard stone in my stomach. I was not going to fight for a girl who hated me. I was not going to bleed my company dry to pay for lawyers. I was not going to die for them. The doorbell rang, a long, insistent chime that echoed up the stairs. Right on time. I took my time walking down the stairs. Each step felt deliberate. In my past life, I had rushed to the door, a towel in my hands, completely unprepared for the ghost standing on my porch. I had panicked. I had tried to physically push Rachel, back out screaming at her, while Chloe stood on the stairs, watching me look like an unhinged lunatic, assaulting a crying woman. This time, I was dressed in a sharp navy slacks and a silk blouse. I paused at the bottom of the stairs. Chloe was already in the foyer, her hand on the doorknob. "I'll get it," she yelled, yanking the heavy oak door open. I stood in the shadow of the hallway, watching. Rachel stood on the porch. The years had not been kind to her, but she had weaponized the damage. She looked thin, fragile. She wore a faded floral dress that was slightly too big, designed to make her look small and harmless. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes were already swimming with practiced, well-timed tears. She smelled of stale tobacco, covered up by cheap vanilla body spray. It was a scent that made my stomach turn. "Can I help you?" Chloe asked, crossing her arms, giving the stranger her best wealthy teenager sneer. Rachel let out a choked, wet gasp. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God! Oh, look at you! You're beautiful!" Chloe blinked, taken aback. "Do I know you?" "Chloe." Rachel sobbed. She took a step forward, reaching out a trembling hand. I'm your mother. In my past life, this was the moment I intervened. I rushed forward, shoving Rachel back, yelling threats. I made myself the villain instantly. I gave Rachel the perfect victim narrative. This time, I leaned against the archway of the living room and said nothing. Chloe froze. Her eyes darted from Rachel's tear-stained face to the cheap shoes on her feet. My mother. She had always known she was adopted. I never hid it from her, but she had an idealized fantasy of a tragic, beautiful woman who was forced by cruel circumstance to give her up. Rachel looked tragic, but not beautiful. She looked desperate. "I never wanted to leave you." Rachel wept, tears spilling over her cheeks, cutting tracks through her foundation. "I was so young. I had nothing. I wanted you to have a good life. But my heart, it's been broken every single day for 16 years. I finally got my life together. I finally have a home. I came back for you, my sweet baby. I came back. It was a brilliant performance. Truly. If I hadn't spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on private investigators in my past life, I wouldn't have known that Rachel's home was a trailer she shared with a guy currently awaiting trial for wire fraud, or that she only sought Chloe out because she read a profile piece on my company in Forbes and realized the baby she dumped was now an heiress. Chloe looked overwhelmed. Tears welled in her own eyes. Teenagers are hardwired for drama, and this was the ultimate soap opera. You came back. I did, Rachel whispered, stepping over the threshold. I want to make up for lost time. If Sarah will let me. Rachel looked past Chloe, spotting me in the shadows. Her eyes hardened for a fraction of a second, a predator assessing prey, before melting back into a puddle of victimhood. Sarah, please, I just want to know my daughter. I pushed off the wall and walked into the light. I kept my face entirely neutral. No anger, no fear. Hello, Rachel. I said, my voice steady and cool. Sarah, please, Rachel cried, clasping her hands together. Don't send me away. I know I messed up. I know you've done a great job. But I'm her real mother. A child needs her real mother. Blood calls to blood. I just want a chance. Chloe turned to me, her face defiant, already bracing for the fight. Mom, you can't kick her out. She's my mother. I have a right to know her. I looked at Chloe, the flush in her cheeks, the furious entitlement. She was already choosing the fantasy over the woman who stayed up with her for a week straight when she had pneumonia. You're right, I said. Silence dropped over the foyer like a lead weight. Chloe's mouth opened and closed. What? Rachel's fake sobs hitched. She stared at me, visibly confused. What did you say? I said, she's right. I repeated, folding my arms. I'm not going to keep a child from her biological mother. If you're back, Rachel, and you want to be a mother, then step up. Be a mother. Rachel blinked, thrown completely off script. Yes, exactly. I want to, visit. Take her to lunch. Maybe weekend sleepovers. No, I interrupted, my tone, mild but razor sharp. 16 years is a lot to make up for. A few lunches won't cut it. A mother isn't a weekend gig. A mother provides. A mother houses, feeds, and disciplines. I turned my gaze to Chloe. You've been telling me all week that I ruin your life, that I don't understand you. Maybe your biological mother will understand you better. Chloe took a step back, her defiance replaced by sudden uncertainty. What are you talking about? I looked back at Rachel. I could see the panic starting to tick behind her eyes. She wanted a foothold in my house. She wanted to guilt me into writing checks. She wanted a payday. She absolutely did not want a spoiled 16-year-old girl thrown into her lap full time. I'm giving you what you asked for Rachel. Full custody, I said. The words tasted like cold water in a desert. I felt lighter. The phantom pain in my chest was completely gone. You want your daughter? You can have her. Today. Rachel's mouth worked silently for a few seconds. Sarah, be reasonable. I just got here. She can't just move in with me today. It's too fast. Think of Chloe's feelings. My feelings, Chloe snapped, looking between us. She puffed out her chest, trying to regain the upper hand. You can't just throw me out, Mom. That's illegal. Actually, it's not, I replied calmly. Rachel is your biological mother. Her rights were never legally severed. We did a guardianship arrangement because she abandoned you before the paperwork was finalized. I am your guardian, but if your biological mother is here willing and able to take you, and you want to go with her, no judge is going to stop it. I won't fight it. I turned and walked up the stairs. Come on, Chloe. Let's pack. Chloe didn't move. I'm not packing. I stopped on the third step and looked down at her. You said I was a monster an hour ago because I wouldn't give you $1,000 for a swimsuit. You said I ruin your life. Here is your real mother. She loves you so much, she cried on the doorstep. Are you saying you don't want to go with her? Because if she leaves now, she's not coming back. I was forcing her hand, backing her into a corner, lined with her own teenage rebellion. Chloe looked at Rachel. Rachel forced a tight, panicked smile and nodded. Of course I want you, sweetie. Rachel lied, the words sounding like they were choking her. It's just a big change. I'll pack, Chloe spat, glaring at me with pure hatred. Fine. I'd rather live in a cardboard box than live with you anyway. At least she actually loves me. She stomped past me, up the stairs. I followed her into her bedroom. The room was massive, decorated in soft grays and blush pinks, custom furniture, a walk-in closet bursting with designer clothes. Chloe grabbed a large hard-shell suitcase and threw it on the bed. She started yanking dresses and jeans off the hangers, tossing them in haphazardly. I walked over to her nightstand. I picked up the keys to the Audi A4 I had bought her for her 16th birthday. I slipped them into my pocket. Chloe spun around. Hey, those are mine. No, they're mine, I said. The title and insurance are in my name. I paid for it. Since you're moving out and Rachel is taking over your care, I can't be liable for a minor driving my vehicle while not under my roof. Rachel will have to buy you a car. Chloe's face flushed deep red. You're taking my car. You're being a petty bitch. Language, I said automatically before catching myself. I didn't need to discipline her anymore. I'm being legally responsible. Keep packing. I walked over to her desk and picked up her wallet. I opened it and pulled out the American Express Platinum card attached to my account. Don't touch that. She lunged for it. I held it out of reach. My name is on the account, Chloe. You are Rachel's responsibility now. It wouldn't be right for me to interfere with her financial provisions for you. She stood there, breathing heavily, panic finally starting to crack through the anger. She was playing a game of chicken, waiting for me to break down, cry, and beg her to stay. In my past life, I had gotten on my knees. I just smiled warmly. Make sure you pack your toothbrush. Downstairs, Rachel was pacing the foyer. When she heard us coming down, me carrying one bag, and Chloe dragging the other, she stopped her eyes wide. She's all yours, Rachel, I said, dropping the bag by the door. Her birth certificate and medical records are in the front pocket of the black suitcase. She has a mild allergy to penicillin. She needs a new winter coat soon. Rachel looked at the massive suitcases, then at Chloe, who was sulking, clearly expecting me to stop them at the last second. Sarah, let's talk about this, Rachel said, her voice, dropping the dramatic vibrato, becoming hard and calculating. Raising a kid is expensive. I'm just getting on my feet. Maybe we can work out a support arrangement. You know, a stipend to help with her transition. There it was, the grift. I looked Rachel dead in the eye. I am not legally obligated to pay you a dime. You want her? You pay for her. If you can't afford her, you shouldn't have come back. I opened the front door. The August heat rolled in. Chloe, have a good life, I said. I didn't sound angry. I just sounded finished. Chloe looked at me, her lip trembling slightly, but her pride was too immense. She grabbed the handle of her suitcase. Whatever, let's go, Mom, she said to Rachel, Rachel looked like she was marching to her own execution, but she couldn't back down now without losing face entirely. She grabbed the other bag, muttering under her breath, and walked out the door. I stood on the porch and watched them walk down the long paved driveway. Chloe kept looking over her shoulder, waiting for me to yell out. I didn't. They reached the end of the driveway, where a rusted 10-year-old sedan was parked half on the grass. Chloe stopped staring at the car in horror. I could hear her high-pitched voice carrying on the wind. We're taking that. I stepped back inside and closed the heavy oak door. The lock clicked into place with a solid, satisfying thud. I stood in the foyer alone. The house was completely silent. For 16 years, this house had been filled with demands, complaints, slammed doors, and my own constant grinding anxiety. I took a deep breath. My chest expanded. No pain, no pressure. I walked into the kitchen, opened a bottle of Pinot Noir, and poured myself a generous glass. I raised it to the empty room. Happy rebirth to me, I whispered, and took a drink. It tasted like freedom. The first 48 hours were a revelation, in silence. In my previous life, those 2 days were a blur of hyperventilation and frantic phone calls. I had hired a private investigator within 6 hours of Rachel showing up. I had called my lawyer at 2 a.m. I hadn't eaten. I had paced the hardwood floors of my living room until my feet blistered, terrified that Chloe was sleeping in a ditch. This time I slept for 9 uninterrupted hours. I woke up, made myself a French press of Kona coffee, and sat on my patio watching the morning dew evaporate off the manicured lawn. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look at social media. I just breathed. It was Tuesday morning when the illusion of their grand mother-daughter reunion began to fracture. I was at my office. Harrison Logistics occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek, glass-fronted building downtown. I built this company by outworking, outnegotiating, and outlasting men twice my age and half my intellect. Yet in my first life, I had let a teenage girl and a motel-dwelling grifter tear my empire down to the studs. I had sold off fleets of trucks at a loss to pay legal settlements. Not this time. My desk phone buzzed. My assistant Pam spoke through the intercom. Sarah, you have a call on line 2. It's an unknown number, but the caller says it's Chloe. She sounds upset. I clicked the mouse, saving the quarterly projection spreadsheet I was reviewing. Put her through. A sharp click. Then heavy breathing. My phone is off, Chloe said. No greeting. No hello. Just the immediate, breathless demand. Good morning to you too, I replied, leaning back in my leather chair. I looked out the window at the city skyline. And yes, your phone is off. I canceled the line yesterday afternoon. You canceled my phone. Her voice went up an octave, scraping the edge of hysterics. Are you insane? I'm using Rachel's phone right now, and it's a piece of crap. How am I supposed to talk to Jenna? How am I supposed to check anything? You're not my dependent anymore, Chloe. I don't pay bills for people who don't live in my house. Mom, stop playing this stupid game, she shrieked. The background noise on her end was telling. I could hear the tinny, obnoxious blare of a daytime television commercial and the low, constant rumble of highway traffic. Rachel's trailer park was pressed right up against Interstate 95. I need my phone turned back on right now. This place is disgusting. There's no air conditioning. I slept on a couch that smells like old beer, and Rachel's boyfriend kept staring at me this morning. Come pick me up. My hand tightened around the armrest of my chair. In the past, the mere mention of a strange man looking at my daughter would have sent me sprinting to the parking garage. I would have driven my SUV through the side of that trailer to get her out. But I remembered the courtroom. I remembered Gary the boyfriend. I remembered how Chloe had sat next to him on the defendant's bench, nodding along as Gary's sleazy lawyer accused me of being a controlling narcissist. Chloe had known exactly what kind of man Gary was, and she had chosen to protect him and Rachel just to spite me. "I'm not coming to pick you up," I said softly. Silence hung on the line, heavy and suffocating. "What?" Her voice broke. The bravado slipped, revealing the terrified 16-year-old underneath. "Mom, please. It's gross here. Rachel doesn't even have real food. She gave me a Pop-Tart for dinner. I want to come home. You made your choice, Chloe. You said I ruined your life. You said you'd rather live in a cardboard box than with me. You packed your bags. You walked out the door." I kept my tone perfectly even. No malice, no triumph, just the cold, hard facts. Rachel is your biological mother. You demanded your right to know her. Now you know her. "I was just mad," she cried out. "You know how I get. You're supposed to be the adult. You can't just abandon me." "I didn't abandon you. I opened the door. You walked through it." I picked up a silver pen from my desk, turning it over in my fingers. "Tell Rachel she needs to take you to the AT&T store and set up a prepaid plan. And tell her to buy some groceries. Goodbye, Chloe." "Mom, don't you dare hang." I pressed the button. The line went dead. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. My chest felt tight, a ghost of the old maternal panic flaring up, but I crushed it down. I had to let her burn her own fingers on the stove. If I rescued her now, she would learn nothing. She would just file this away as another tantrum that successfully manipulated me. Besides, the real pain hadn't even started yet. Thursday afternoon, I walked into the law offices of David Aris. David had been my corporate attorney for a decade, and he had handled the messy, informal guardianship paperwork when Rachel first dumped Chloe on my doorstep. He was a bulldog in a suit, shrewd, cynical, and ruthlessly efficient. In my previous life, I had ignored his advice to play hardball with Rachel. I had let my emotions steer the litigation, which was exactly why I lost. I sat down in the leather chair opposite his mahogany desk and slid a single manila folder across the polished wood. "I need to sever my guardianship of Chloe," I said. David paused his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly. "Sever? You mean you want to formally transfer custody back to the biological mother? Sarah, you've raised that girl since she was in diapers. Did something happen?" Rachel came back. David's face darkened. He remembered Rachel. "And she has no legal leg to stand on. She abandoned the child. We can get a restraining order by 5 o'clock today. I can have a private investigator dig up whatever hole she crawled out of and bury her in unfit parent documentation. I don't want to fight her, David." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "I let Chloe go with her." David stared at me as if I had just spoken to him in Aramaic. "You let her go, just like that, just like that." Chloe wanted her real mom. Rachel wanted her daughter. I gave them both exactly what they asked for. I tapped the manila folder. Inside are the draft documents. I want you to make it ironclad. I am relinquishing all financial and legal responsibility for Chloe. Medical, educational, civil liability. Everything. I want it transferred solely to Rachel. David opened the folder. He skimmed the documents, his eyes darting back and forth. "Sarah, this is nuclear. If you sign this, you have no rights. If Rachel decides to move to another state, you can't stop her. If Chloe ends up in trouble, you have no legal standing to intervene. I am aware. He closed the folder. I have to ask, are you doing this to teach the kid a lesson? Because playing chicken with a teenager is a dangerous game, especially when a grifter like Rachel is involved. I'm doing this to save my own life, David. I looked him dead in the eye. I couldn't tell him the truth, that I had lived through the alternative, that I had died penniless and broken-hearted because I fought for a girl who hated me. Rachel is looking for a payday. She thinks Chloe is a meal ticket. I am cutting off the funds. When Rachel realizes there is no money, the true colors will show, and I refuse to be held legally liable for the fallout. David studied me for a long moment. He nodded slowly. All right, I'll finalize the paperwork. We'll need Rachel to sign, acknowledging the transfer of custody and the waiver of any financial support from you. She'll be here tomorrow, I said, checking my watch. I already scheduled the meeting. Friday morning, the reception area of David's office was thick with tension. Rachel walked in first. She had tried to dress up, wearing a cheap blazer over her floral dress, but she just looked tired and nervous. She didn't look like a victorious mother who had won back her child. She looked like a cornered animal. Chloe trailed behind her, looking utterly miserable. Her hair was greasy. She was wearing the same designer jeans from 3 days ago, but they looked wrinkled and stained. When Chloe saw me sitting at the conference table next to David, her eyes lit up with desperate relief. She took a step forward. Mom, I didn't smile. I didn't reach out. I just gestured to the empty chairs across the table. Have a seat. Chloe froze. The relief drained from her face, replaced by a sullen, wounded anger. She slumped into a chair, crossing her arms and glaring at the wall. Rachel sat down cautiously. Sarah, what is this? Why are we at a lawyer's office? I thought we were going to discuss the transition. We are, I said. David slid a thick stack of papers across the table. These are the legal documents, transferring full guardianship and parental rights back to you, Rachel. David said, his voice crisp and professional. As the biological mother, and with Sarah's consent, the court will formally recognize you as Chloe's sole guardian. Sarah will have no legal standing and, crucially, no financial obligation to either of you. Rachel stared at the papers as if they were a live bomb. No financial obligation, but, Sarah, you have to help. I mean the food alone. And she wants a car and her phone. Rachel's voice cracked. She dropped the victim act. Her eyes narrowed. You can't just dump a teenager on me and walk away. She's accustomed to a certain lifestyle. A judge will make you pay child support. David let out a dry, barking laugh. A judge won't make her pay a dime. Sarah never formally adopted Chloe because you vanished before signing the final consent forms. Sarah was a legal guardian. She is terminating that guardianship. You are the mother. The financial burden is yours. Rachel slammed her hand on the table. This is bullshit. You're a millionaire. You're just trying to starve us out. I leaned forward. I kept my voice low, dropping it to a deadly, quiet register. I'm trying to give you a chance to be a mother, Rachel. Isn't that what you wanted? I stared into her eyes, watching the panic rise. Or did you just want to check? Because let me be perfectly clear. If you don't sign these papers today, taking full legal custody, I will call Child Protective Services. I will have them inspect the trailer you live in. I will inform them about your boyfriend, Gary, and the fact that he's currently under federal investigation for wire fraud. Rachel flinched violently, the color completely washed out of her face. How do you know about Gary? I know everything. I lied smoothly. The private investigators from my past life had done exceptional work. I just had the luxury of their findings a few years early. I know he uses your address for his business. I know the local police have been called to your lot 3 times this year for domestic disturbances. If you want to fight, Rachel, I will bury you. I will have Chloe placed in a state facility before I give you a single dollar. Chloe gasped. She looked at Rachel, horrified. What? Who is Gary? What is she talking about? Rachel ignored her. She was sweating now. She realized she had walked into a trap. She thought she was shaking down a guilt-ridden mother. Instead, she was staring across the table at a CEO who negotiated cutthroat shipping contracts for a living. Sign the papers, Rachel, I said softly. You take the girl, you walk away, and I pretend I don't know you exist. That's the deal. Rachel looked at the pen resting on the documents. She looked at Chloe, who was suddenly staring at her biological mother, with genuine fear. Rachel picked up the pen. Her hand shook as she scrawled her signature on the bottom line. She shoved the papers back across the table and stood up. You're a cold bitch, Sarah. I'm practical, I corrected her. Rachel turned and marched out of the conference room. Chloe didn't move immediately. She sat perfectly still, looking at me. For a fraction of a second, the armor cracked. I saw the little girl I had taught to ride a bicycle. I saw the toddler who used to fall asleep on my chest. It hurt. God, it hurt, like a physical tear in my muscle. But then, I remembered the hospital room. I remembered the absolute crushing loneliness of my death. You'd better go, Chloe, I said. Your mother is waiting. Chloe stood up. Her eyes were bright with tears, but her jaw was set in rigid defiance. You're going to regret this. You're going to be all alone. I already am, I said. She turned and ran out the door. September arrived with a brutal lingering heat wave. At Harrison Logistics, third quarter profits were up 12%. Without the distraction of Chloe's constant crises and the emotional drain of my impending legal war, I was hyper-focused. I fired a toxic middle manager I had previously been too exhausted to deal with. I renegotiated our fuel contracts, saving the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was thriving. Chloe was not. I knew this because I hadn't completely detached myself from reality. I didn't hire a PI. I refused to spend the money, but I didn't have to. The social ecosystem of a wealthy suburban high school is a highly efficient gossip machine. Chloe attended St. Jude's Preparatory Academy. The tuition was $42,000 a year. It was a campus of manicured lawns, brick buildings, and parking lots filled with Range Rovers and Mercedes, driven by 16-year-olds. In my previous life, I had continued paying the tuition even after Chloe moved out. I had paid for her uniforms, her expensive field trips, and her catered lunches, terrified that she would be ostracized. I subsidized her popularity while she lived in a trailer park, allowing her to maintain a dual life. She played the tragic, misunderstood princess to her rich friends and the victim of an abusive, wealthy tyrant to Rachel's grifter social circle. This time, I called the bursar's office the day after Rachel signed the custody papers. I informed them that I was no longer Chloe's guardian and canceled the auto draft for the spring semester. I also canceled her school meal plan and the credit account at the campus bookstore. I paid for the fall semester. It was non-refundable anyway, but nothing else. The reality hit Chloe on the first day of classes. It was a Tuesday. I had a lunch meeting at a high-end bistro about 4 blocks from the St. Jude's campus. I was sitting at a patio table going over some documents with a client when I saw her. School had let out early for the first day. The sidewalk across the street was crowded with teenagers in the St. Jude's uniform navy blazers, plaid skirts, khaki slacks. They moved in loud laughing packs, heading toward the local coffee shops and boutique stores. Chloe was walking with Jenna and 3 other girls from her inner circle. In my previous life, Chloe was the undisputed queen bee. She had my money, my house for pool parties, and the pristine Audi I bought her. Now she looked out of place. Her uniform blazer was wrinkled. The hem of her plaid skirt was slightly frayed. But worse than her appearance was her posture. She was walking stiffly, her shoulders hunched constantly, looking around with a frantic, nervous energy. I watched as the group stopped at the corner. Jenna, a tall blonde girl whose father owned a chain of car dealerships, pointed toward a sleek cafe down the block. I couldn't hear them, but I could read the body language. Jenna was suggesting they go get iced lattes and pastries. Chloe shook her head. She pointed in the opposite direction. She looked panicked. She kept checking her phone, a cheap, plastic burner phone. I saw Jenna's eyes dart to the device, her brow furrowing in confusion. Rich kids can spot a drop in status like sharks smell blood in the water. Then a sound cut through the bustling street noise. It was a high-pitched, grinding squeal of failing brakes, followed by the deep, rattling cough of a broken muffler. Everyone on the corner turned to look. Pulling up to the curb, right in front of the immaculate St. Jude's students, was Gary's car. It was a mid-90s sedan, originally beige, but now a patchwork of rust bondo and peeling primer. The passenger side door was dented inward. Black exhaust smoke puffed from the tailpipe as the engine idled violently. Rachel was driving. She had the window rolled down. She leaned across the passenger seat and honked the horn. It sounded like a dying goose. "Chloe," Rachel yelled, her voice easily carrying across the street. "Come on. Gary needs the car back for work." The silence that fell over Chloe's group of friends was palpable. They stared at the rusted monstrosity idling at the curb, and then they turned their collective judgmental gaze slowly back to Chloe. Jenna's mouth was slightly open. "Chloe, is that your ride?" Chloe looked like she wanted the concrete sidewalk to open up and swallow her whole. Her face flushed a violent, blotchy red. She didn't say a word to her friends. She didn't say goodbye. She just put her head down, walked quickly to the car, and yanked the passenger door open. It shrieked on unoiled hinges. She threw herself inside and slammed it shut. The car sputtered, backfired, once making 2 of the private school girls jump and shriek, and then limped away into traffic. I sat at my table, watching the taillights disappear. My client, a middle-aged man in a sharp suit, noticed my distraction. "Everything all right, Sarah?" he asked, following my gaze down the street. "Rough-looking car for this neighborhood." I turned back to the table, picking up my pen. I felt a cold, hard knot of satisfaction tighten in my chest. In my previous life, Chloe had dragged my reputation through the mud. She had stood in court and called me a monster while wearing a $300 dress I paid for. Now she was experiencing exactly what she had signed up for, the unvarnished, ugly reality of Rachel's life. "Everything is perfectly fine," I told my client, offering him a sharp, genuine smile. "Let's talk about the freight margins for Q4. I didn't reach out to Chloe that night. I didn't call to see if she was okay. I knew what was happening in that trailer. I knew the screaming matches that were likely taking place. Chloe, entitled and furious, demanding to know why she couldn't take an Uber, or why Rachel embarrassed her. Rachel stressed and broke screaming back about ungrateful brats and how much gasoline costs. Let them fight. Let them tear each other apart. 2 weeks later, the real consequence of my financial withdrawal hit. It was a Friday evening. I was at home, sitting in my library, with a glass of scotch, reading a novel. The house was quiet. It was a profound, deeply comforting quiet that I was finally getting used to. The doorbell rang. It was a hesitant, short ring. Not the aggressive, demanding chime Chloe used to use. I set my book down, walked into the foyer, and checked the security camera feed on the wall monitor. It was Chloe. She was standing on the porch alone. It was raining slightly, a cold, misty September drizzle. She wasn't wearing a jacket. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and she looked exhausted. The defiant, furious teenager from the lawyer's office was gone. She looked small. I stared at the screen. A part of me, the old Sarah, the mother, who had fundamentally broken her own heart for this girl, screamed to open the door, to pull her inside, wrap her in a warm blanket, and tell her everything was going to be all right. But I placed my hand flat against the cool wall next to the monitor. She watched you die. A voice whispered in the back of my mind. She drained your accounts and let you die alone. I didn't move. On the screen, Chloe reached out and rang the bell one more time. She waited for 2 minutes. Then she stepped back, looking up at the dark windows of the second floor. Her shoulders hitched. She was crying. She turned and walked slowly down the long driveway, disappearing into the dark and the rain. I walked back into the library, picked up my scotch, and turned the page of my book. October crept in, bringing a bitter, damp chill that stripped the leaves from the trees and turned the sky a permanent bruising gray. At Harrison Logistics, I was finalizing the acquisition of a smaller regional rival. It was a massive, multi-million-dollar deal that required 14-hour days, endless contract revisions, and a ruthless focus. I thrived in the pressure. In my previous life, I had lost this exact deal because I was too distracted by Chloe's third suspension from school and a vicious legal motion filed by Rachel's attorney. The competitor had swooped in and bought the regional firm, slowly strangling my market share over the next 2 years. This time, my mind was a steel trap. We closed the deal on a Tuesday. I took my executive team out for steaks in vintage Bordeaux. I went home to a quiet house, slept like the dead, and woke up ready to dominate the next quarter. Chloe's descent, by contrast, was a slow, agonizing slide down a jagged cliff. I heard the updates through the unavoidable suburban grapevine. Pam, my assistant, had a niece at St. Jude's Preparatory. Pam tried to tread lightly, but she knew I needed the intelligence. She dropped out of the fall play. Pam mentioned one morning handing me my espresso. Apparently, she hasn't been turning in her homework either. My niece said Chloe got caught stealing lunch from the cafeteria last week. A pre-packaged turkey sandwich. The school counselor had to intervene. I took a sip of the espresso. It was perfectly bitter. Did the school call Rachel? They tried. Pam said, her voice laced with a mixture of pity and judgment. The number was disconnected. They sent an email. No response. I nodded, turning my attention to my monitor. Thank you, Pam. Get the Denver office on the line, please. I didn't feel a surge of vindictive joy. I just felt a profound, heavy confirmation of what I already knew. Chloe was learning the physics of poverty. It has a gravity that pulls everything down. When you live in a trailer with a hole in the roof, when you don't know if the electricity will be on, when you wake up, when your dinner is a stale bagel from a gas station, algebra stops mattering. The social hierarchy of rich kids stops mattering. You shift from a state of development to a state of primal survival. Chloe had lived her entire life insulated by my money. I had acted as a shock absorber for every bump in her road. When she failed a test, I hired a private tutor. When she wrecked her car, I paid the deductible and bought her a new one. I had fundamentally crippled her ability to handle adversity, mistaking indulgence for love. Rachel and Gary provided plenty of adversity. A week before Thanksgiving, the reality of Gary's business bled over into Chloe's life. I found out later from the police report, which a contact at the precinct quietly passed along to me. Gary ran a sophisticated fencing operation mixed with wire fraud. He bought stolen electronics, laptops, tablets, high-end phones, wiped them, and sold them overseas. He used Rachel's trailer as a holding area. According to the report, a deal went sour. 2 men showed up at the trailer park at 3 a.m, demanding cash Gary owed them. Gary wasn't there. Rachel hid in the bathroom. Chloe, terrified and confused, had opened the door. The men pushed past her, tore the living room apart, smashed the television, and took whatever cash they could find. They shoved Chloe against the wall on their way out, bruising her shoulder, warning her to tell Gary his time was up. In my first life, a bruise on Chloe's shoulder would have sent me into a homicidal rage. I would have hired private security. I would have burned the city down to find the men who touched her. Now, sitting in my pristine kitchen, looking at the scanned police report on my tablet, I just swiped the screen and deleted the file. She wanted her real mother. Her real mother hid in the bathtub while thugs assaulted her. That Thursday, Chloe tried to bypass my boundaries. I was walking out of my office building at 6 p.m. The wind was howling off the street, biting through my wool coat. I was heading toward the private parking garage when a figure stepped out from the shadow of the concrete pillar. "Mom." I stopped. It had been nearly 3 months. The physical transformation was jarring. Chloe looked hollowed out. She had lost at least 10 pounds she couldn't afford to lose. Her hair, previously a shiny, salon-maintained blonde, was dull and pulled back in a greasy knot. She was wearing a cheap thin windbreaker that offered zero protection against the November cold. She was shivering violently. "Hello, Chloe," I said. My voice echoed slightly in the concrete cavern of the garage. She wrapped her arms around her torso, her teeth actually chattering. I need help, please." She didn't sound defiant anymore. She sounded broken. "Rachel has legal custody." I stated, keeping a 10-foot distance between us. "You need to talk to her." "She doesn't care," Chloe sobbed, her voice cracking. "She's always high, or she's fighting with Gary. Gary is dangerous, Mom. Some guys broke into the trailer. They pushed me. I'm scared. I'm so hungry all the time. Please, just let me come home. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I said those things. You were right. She doesn't love me. She just wanted your money." She took a step toward me, reaching a hand out. I didn't flinch, but I didn't step forward to meet her. I looked at her hand. It was trembling, her fingernails bitten down to the quick. I know she only wanted the money, Chloe. I knew it the day she stood on the porch. The problem is, you knew it too. Chloe froze. The tears spilled over her pale cheeks. "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did," I said softly. The truth hung in the freezing air between us, sharp as broken glass. You aren't stupid. You knew Rachel was a disaster. But you chose her anyway, because she offered you a weapon to use against me. You wanted to punish me for having rules. You wanted to hurt me. And you were willing to risk your own life to do it. I was just a kid. I was mad. She wailed, her chest heaving. You're my mother. You're supposed to forgive me. I did forgive you. The first time, I thought of the hospital room, the endless beeping, the silence of my phone. I forgave you 1,000 times. But forgiveness doesn't mean restoration. It doesn't mean I have to let you destroy me. You made a choice to leave. The consequences of that choice belong to you. I'll die out here, she screamed, pure panic taking over. If I go back there, something bad is going to happen to me. Then go to the police. Tell them you're a minor in an unsafe environment. They will place you in foster care. I said, my tone clinical and detached. But you are not getting in my car, and you are not coming back to my house. I pressed the button on my keys. My SUV chirped the headlights, cutting through the gloom of the garage. Chloe dropped to her knees on the dirty concrete. She openly wept, burying her face in her hands. It was a pathetic, agonizing sight. A mother's biological instinct is to protect her child. But my instinct had been surgically removed by the trauma of my previous death. The girl crying on the concrete wasn't my daughter. She was a parasite that had finally been excised. I opened the car door, got in, and locked it. I started the engine. I didn't look back as I drove out of the garage, merging into the heavy city traffic. The collapse, when it finally happened, was spectacularly ugly. It was mid-December. The city was blanketed in a thick, gray slush. Retail stores were blasting holiday music, but the cheer felt artificial and strained. Gary's luck finally ran out. The feds didn't just raid the trailer. They executed a coordinated sweep of his entire operation across 3 counties. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I read about it in the local business journal's crime blotter before Pam even had a chance to tell me. A joint FBI and local task force had seized over $500,000 in stolen goods and arrested 6 men, including Gary. Rachel, true to her fundamental nature, reacted with the survival instinct of a cockroach. I pieced the narrative together weeks later from court documents and a very brief phone call from a social worker. When the police kicked the door of the trailer in at 6 a.m., Rachel wasn't there. Gary had received a tip-off from a dirty pawn shop owner an hour earlier. He panicked and told Rachel the feds were coming. Rachel didn't wake Chloe up. She didn't pack a bag for her daughter. She grabbed a duffel bag, emptied the lockbox hidden under the floorboards, which contained about $8,000 of Gary's illicit cash, and climbed out the back window of the trailer. She stole a neighbor's rusted pickup truck and vanished. When the tactical team breached the front door, they found Gary desperately trying to flush SIM cards down the toilet, and they found Chloe asleep on the beer-stained couch in the living room. She woke up to the sound of screaming, shattering glass, and assault rifles pointed at her head. They dragged Gary out in handcuffs. They tore the trailer down to the insulation, pulling out stolen laptops, burner phones, and a 1/4 pound of methamphetamine Gary had been holding for an associate. They put Chloe in the back of a squad car. She was 17 years old, legally a minor. The police tried to locate her legal guardian. They ran Rachel's name, but she was gone, a ghost in the wind, fleeing across state lines with stolen money. Then they found the old guardianship records tying Chloe to me. My phone rang at 2 p.m. I was in the middle of a board meeting projecting our Q1 targets for the newly expanded logistics network. I saw the caller ID, the city police department. I held up a hand, pausing the presentation. I stepped out of the glass-walled conference room and into the quiet hallway. "Sarah Harrison," I answered. "Ms. Harrison, this is Officer Miller with the Juvenile Division." A gruff voice said, "We have a minor in custody, Chloe. We're trying to locate her mother, Rachel, but she appears to have fled the scene of a federal raid. Your name came up in the system as a previous guardian." Previous is the operative word, officer, I said, smoothly leaning against the wall. "I legally severed my guardianship in September. The documents were filed with the family court. I have no legal, financial, or physical responsibility for her." There was a heavy pause on the line. "Ma'am, she has nowhere to go. Her biological mother abandoned her at a crime scene. She's sitting in an interrogation room in a t-shirt. She's shivering. She keeps asking for you." I closed my eyes. The phantom smell of the hospital room washed over me. The sterile bleach, the crushing silence of my own death. She had left me in a room just like that. She had taken my money, laughed with the woman who abandoned her, and waited for my heart monitor to flatline. "I cannot help you, officer. My legal team can send over the severance documents if your precinct hasn't updated its database yet. I advise you to contact Child Protective Services." "Ms. Harrison, are you seriously refusing to come down here? She's your kid." "She is not my kid," I said, my voice dropping to a register of absolute terrifying calm. "I suggest you process her into the system. Do not call this number again." I hung up the phone. I stood in the hallway for exactly 30 seconds, regulating my breathing. I smoothed the lapels of my tailored suit, turned the doorknob, and walked back into the board meeting. Apologies for the interruption. I told my executives, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Let's review the fleet maintenance budget." Chloe went into the system. Because she was 17, just months away from her 18th birthday, the foster system didn't know what to do with her. She was placed in a state-run group home for older teens on the outskirts of the city. It was a bleak institutional facility designed to warehouse troubled kids until they aged out. She lost everything. Her designer clothes were left in the trailer, seized as evidence or thrown away by the landlord. Her phone was gone. Her friends at St. Jude's had completely scrubbed her from their social media, treating her like a contagious disease. She was entirely alone. 2 years later, the spring air was crisp and smelled of rain and blooming jasmine. I was 40 years old. I felt 25. Harrison Logistics had doubled in size. We went public in the first quarter of the year, and the IPO was a staggering success. I was wealthy beyond anything I had achieved in my previous life. But more importantly, I was healthy. My resting heart rate was perfect. The stress cardiomyopathy that had killed me was a ghost of a timeline that no longer existed. I slept deeply. I traveled. I lived. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was leaving a charity luncheon at a downtown hotel, waiting under the massive awning for the valet to bring my car around. The street was bustling with business people and tourists. I was checking an email on my phone when a voice stopped me. "Sarah." It wasn't Mom. It was my name. I looked up. Chloe was standing a few feet away. She was 19 now. She was unrecognizable from the spoiled, entitled princess who had demanded $1,000 for a swimsuit 3 years ago. She wore a faded gray hoodie and dark, shapeless jeans. Her hair was cut short, a jagged, practical style. She looked exhausted. There were deep, dark circles under her eyes, and the harsh reality of minimum wage survival had etched thin lines around her mouth. She held a plastic grocery bag in one hand. We stared at each other. The air between us felt thick heavy, with the ghosts of two different lifetimes. "Hello, Chloe," I said. My voice was gentle. There was no anger left in me. There was nothing left to burn. She swallowed hard. She looked at my tailored suit, the expensive leather bag on my arm, the sheer, undeniable aura of success that surrounded me. She looked down at her own scuffed sneakers. "I saw you on the news," she said, her voice quiet, almost hoarse. "About the company going public. Congratulations." "Thank you." She shifted her weight nervously. "I work at a diner a few blocks from here. I just got off shift. I didn't plan to run into you." "It's a small city," I offered politely. Silence stretched between us. In the past, this silence would have killed me. I would have been desperate to fill it, desperate to fix her, to drag her into a boutique and buy her a new wardrobe, to hand her the keys to an apartment. I just waited. "Rachel never came back," Chloe said, suddenly. The words tumbled out of her, as if she couldn't hold them in anymore. "The feds caught Gary. He's in prison, but Rachel disappeared. I haven't heard from her in 2 years. She just left me there." "I know." Chloe looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You knew she would. You knew exactly what she was. You tried to warn me." "I did. I was so stupid," she whispered, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her pale cheek. "I threw my whole life away. I threw you away. I aged out of the group home. I live in a studio apartment with 3 other girls. I wash dishes for 10 hours a day. I'm so tired, Sarah. I'm just so tired." She looked at me, an agonizing, silent plea in her eyes. She wasn't asking for money this time. She was asking for absolution. She was asking for the mother she had murdered in my previous life to resurrect herself and save her. I looked at her, truly, looked at her. I saw the regret. I saw the genuine suffering. I knew that she had finally learned the lesson. She understood the value of what she had destroyed. But understanding doesn't rewrite history. A burned bridge is still ash, even if you regret striking the match. The valet pulled my sleek black Mercedes sedan up to the curb. He stepped out and opened the door for me. "I'm sorry your life has been difficult, Chloe," I said. And I meant it. I didn't hate her anymore. I simply felt the mild, detached pity you feel for a tragic stranger on the evening news. But survival is a good teacher. You're learning how to stand on your own 2 feet. That's something I never allowed you to do. Her shoulders slumped. The last desperate flicker of hope died in her eyes. She realized with crushing finality that the door was permanently locked. There was no redemption arc where I saved her. "Goodbye, Sarah," she whispered. "Take care of yourself, Chloe." I stepped into the car. The heavy door closed with a solid, satisfying thud, instantly silencing the noise of the city street. The leather seats were warm. As the driver pulled away from the curb, I looked out the tinted window. Chloe was walking in the opposite direction, her head down, clutching her plastic grocery bag, disappearing into the crowded gray masses of the city. I turned my attention forward. The road ahead was clear, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, my heart beat with a steady, unbreakable rhythm. And that is how you rewrite history. I didn't waste my second chance screaming or begging. I let the trash take itself out. Chloe learned the hard way that blood doesn't make a mother, and poverty doesn't care about your private school attitude. I built an empire on the ashes of their betrayal, and I've never slept better. If this story satisfied your craving For ultimate stone cold karma, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to learn how to walk away, and subscribe for more stories of rebirth and revenge. Until next time, protect your peace.